there's been some attempts, I think attempts is all we can call it, from the anti-migrant crowd to have some protests today. Should we start off with Liverpool? Do you know? So for those who don't know, sound check. Hopefully the sound is working. Otherwise, that's embarrassing. No, it is. So sorry, hit the mic. So there's been some attempts at protest for those who don't know. From the, after their victory, right, their court victory in Epping, they thought, oh, let's roll it out across the country. Let's show how. And the GB News are trying to egg it on. Like, even after the protests have clearly failed, I'm going to explain how they failed in a moment, because there were protests, right? GB News, this shows that the country, the anger is increasing against migrants and people, anti-asylum, stuff like that. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so let's start off with Liverpool. So they tried to march through Liverpool, these people. Surely, if you're going to try and do anti-asylum protest marches and you want it to look good for the cameras on the television, you march in areas where you've got a lot of natural support. There's plenty of parts of the country that are quite anti-asylum. Liverpool is not one of them. Liverpool is not one of them. So they didn't get very far, really. But the other thing to note is just in general around the country. So I've been trying to check it out on the BBC, on the news. Let me just show you something. This is just a snapshot of it. I've had a look at various depictions of it and reports, right? So, but this picture's a decent snapshot from what I can tell, right? So, you've got a line of police officers there. They're in the high vis, right? That's a line of police officers keeping two protest groups apart, two antagonistic protest groups apart. It doesn't take a lot to see which is which. There's nothing in that image, unless I really expanded it, massively making it clear who's on the top of that. But it's very obvious who's underneath it, right? So you've got the anti-asylum protest groups brandishing their flags. They've both got flags. Both sides have got flags, to be fair. But brandishing their flags. And, with send them back banners. And then you've got the refugees welcome banners on the other side. You can't really see it too clearly on that image, but that's what they are. So you've got pro-refugee counter-protesters. And you've got anti-migrant protesters, right? And although that doesn't show the whole thing, you need it zoomed out a bit. What I'm seeing, and what I'm seeing reported as well, is the number of pro-refugee protesters, or counter-protesters in this case, pretty much match the number of anti-migrant protesters. So here's my question, and I want to point something else out in a moment as well, but here's my question. So when the media, which is almost exclusively right-wing, pro-Tory, pro-Reform UK, right? When the media is describing this anti-asylum anger around the country, I'm going to just ask a question, right? Is it real or is it hype? Because I absolutely accept that a lot of the public are buying into the anti-asylum stuff. I get, we're completely losing the argument on that one. The far right are winning the argument. They are getting people to be increasingly anti-asylum, at the very least, anti-refugee, by, not by being anti-refugee, but by calling them all illegal immigrants, as if there's no such thing as a refugee in this country, as if there's no such thing as refugees. Oh, we're totally happy to have refugees, but there just aren't any, right? Yeah, of course. I get that that's a real thing. That's not imagined. That's real. But do the public feel strongly about it? That's my thing always, isn't it? Saliency. How strongly do they believe it? Because what I would say is, when feelings are genuinely strong, not everyone who feels strongly goes out and protests, but some do. And I would say the size of the protest is roughly proportional to the strength of the feeling, right? It doesn't mean a massive protest represents the majority of the country or anything like that. But if you're going to say people feel strongly about it, there will be a large protest. These protests, now there were multiple around the country, but the biggest ones numbered, I think, 400 according to reports I can verify, right? So you've got at most a few thousand people turned out. You've got maybe 3,000 people, and I think because there were only a couple that got to 400, it may only be about 2,000. But let's say 3,000 anti-migrant protesters went out. That's a strong feeling, is it? Is that a strong feeling? Because I would argue, given that it was heavily promoted in the media, shouldn't it be stronger than that? Should we compare it with some other things? By far and away, the biggest protest we've had in the last couple of years has been Gaza protests, haven't they? Can you imagine a Gaza protest that only had a few hundred? It'd be laughed off the front pages. It wouldn't feature in the news at all. The news don't promote those, so they're only going to report on if they're massive, right? They had thousands, tens of thousands actually, some of the ones that were happening like in 2023, 2024 in particular. Even the Rejoin March gets like 10, 20,000 people, 25,000 I think maybe last year, something like that. So if they're going to claim that maybe 2,000 or 3,000 people, am I feeling cold? Yeah, it's cold here, but it's August. I refuse to put the heating on. It is actually colder. Apparently it's going to be another bloody heat wave on Monday though. I thought we'd done with them. No, apparently 30 degrees again on Monday. Bloody thing. So keep checking up on vulnerable people. But yeah, that's what I would suggest. I would just ask a question, because I'm actually serious about this. I'm not downplaying anti-asylum feeling in the country. I think it is building. But I want to know how strong is it? Because GB News and the Telegraph and the Express and all that lot are claiming that it's that the strength of feeling is really large because you've got these protests, right? And I'm going to go, so why are the pro-refugee protests matching them? And why are the protests way smaller than anti-Brexit protests, pro-Gaza protests? Like, why is that then? Why do they think that is? Why are the protests so small? Because those are small protests. This was, as I say, this was promoted heavily on social media, in the mainstream media, television, newspapers, social media was promoting these protests today. So why were they so small? I don't think the feeling is as strong as it is. And this is my worry. I'm going to go to some comments in a moment. This is my worry about Labour, for example, who keep going, oh, this is the platform we need to shout about, when it absolutely is not. Again, I'm not saying they should just ignore it all as noise. It's not all just noise, because the message is getting through to people. There is a lot of genuine anti-asylum feeling because they think they're not really asylum seekers, right? But I don't think the feeling is as strong as we're led to believe reading the media. Anyway, go through the comments. So Brad's just put there, how to get rich, incite violence, spend time in jail, then get right-wing outlets to promote you as a victim, raking in the grift money. Oh yeah, Lucy Connolly. Yeah, she will be aiming. People are talking about the fact that the far right are using her and she's too thick to see it. She probably doesn't care as long as she can get some money. She'll just want money out of it. Did you see Femi's video? If you haven't seen Femi's video, that's worth a laugh. Apparently, she was on Dan Wootton because she's... Oh, yeah, did you hear, by the way? Oh, yeah, she's having her freedom of speech denied. She's having her freedom of speech denied, as featured on Dan Wootton, the Daily Telegraph, the Daily Express, the Daily Mail, the Sun, like GB News. She's on them all. She's like, do you know, how dumb are people that believe that? Like, she's saying she's having her freedom of speech denied whilst shouting about it from every mainstream platform there is. Every single one. She's going to be on talk shows next, like proper ones. It's ridiculous. She'll be getting an invitation to the Oval Office next, isn't she? Like, it's utterly ridiculous, isn't it? But she will be aiming to make some... I mean, she's a Tory, right? She wants some money out of it. So she won't mind being used as long as she gets a few quid out of it. So that's what she'll be anchoring after. Anyway, go through some more comments here. Liam there saying, my Facebook is full of people parading about flags and stopping the boats, surrounded by horrible echo chambers to the point I'm very close to deleting my profiles. The thing is, though, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of echo chambers on social media. I mean, that's just the nature of it, right? it makes it feel like it's a bigger thing than it really is. I mean, that's what I would look at this. I think to myself, look, the Rejoin March, which is now happening each year, be happening again this October, will get no mention on the media again, like it never does. Sometimes actually the Express the Express sometimes can be good sports. They'll mention something on page 57 or something, right? Actually, I haven't got a page 57, has it? That's the joke. But it won't get a mention, and yet there'll be way more people at the Rejoin March than there have for any of these anti-migrant protests. And as I say, there's the Gaza protest. They're always big. I mean, the biggest one was 400. And even if you add it together, because you add it all together, again, I'd like to know how many there were altogether. I cannot, from the reports, it doesn't seem that it can be more than 3,000. And there were about that many pro-refugee counter-protests as well. It's like, it's tiny. It's tiny. Do you know what it's like? It's like, not last year, because I was ill last year. I couldn't go to the Rejoin March last year. But the year before, I remember when I went, and there was another protest in the area. This was about the dogs, like the dangerous dogs and stuff like that. What were they called? XL bulldogs, or I don't know. Some dogs that, that have been attacking a lot of kids and stuff. So they were going around, like, protesting in favour of being able to have the dogs, by the way. So they were going around, and there were just a few dozen of them. Tiny, absolutely tiny. They got mentioned in the news. That's what this is like. That's what this is like. The media are just hyping the hell out of it. And the thing is, if they weren't mentioning it, unless if the news had a rule, they don't, obviously, and you wouldn't force them to, but if they had a rule that they couldn't report on any, and you should never do this, I'm not suggesting you do this, but if you just say they had this unwritten rule that they wouldn't comment on any protest that numbered less than 5,000 people, right? People wouldn't even know about these things. They wouldn't know about them because they never get that many. Occasionally, Tommy Robinson at a rally can get a few thousand. That's it. That's it, really. Pissing in shop windows. That's about it. Like, none of the rest of them. Even Nigel Farage, when he did that thing in Birmingham, this massive political rally, he thought he was going to be recreating the Nuremberg rally, right? Didn't even fill the seats, just like Trump couldn't fill the seats. And that's my issue here. The media are hyping it up as if it's representative of this strong public feeling. It's not. Even the anti-asylum group, they can't be asked to turn out. And it's not like they had to go to London. They had these round the country. There was Perth. So you had one in Perth, you had one somewhere. There was a protest. There was at least one protest in Wales. There was at least one protest in Scotland, and there were multiple protests in England. So you had. I'm not saying everyone had one locally to them, but you didn't have to travel that far to get to one. You did if you were in a reasonably populous. Obviously, right at the north of Scotland, you would have struggled, but if you lived anywhere near a reasonably populous part of the country, there was one not far from you. And yet they could hardly get anyone. Anyway. Liam there saying YouTube's my primary source of entertainment and education these days, to be honest. Yes, well, it often is for a lot of people. Yeah, David saying the XL bully dogs, yes. But it was a tiny one, but that got mentioned in the news. And it was like, that got mentioned on the BBC. Rejoin March, way bigger. Orders of magnitude bigger. Nothing. Because I saw that protest. It was there. It was around Parliament Square. It was literally a few dozen of them marching up and down whatever that road is across it. I don't get why people confuse free speech with hate speech. Don't mean hate preach but those by it's my free speech bill. Yeah, basically, and the thing is, this is the key thing, right? Whilst there was a violent mob intent on burning people alive in a hotel, or so it seemed, she was calling for them to do it. She was calling for them to burn them. Like, that's literally incite to hate. It was incite for racial hatred, but it actually makes no difference because, if those people at that hotel had done what she wanted, lots of people would have died. It would have been murder. So she was basically inciting murder. That's not free speech. It's not even hate speech. It's actually inciting murder. And she admitted her guilt. She's now trying to claim, I mean, I think this idea has been put into her, right? She's been like coached for this. But she's now trying to claim she didn't understand the charges. Yes, she did. Because when she was sentenced, she's recorded as saying that she was happy with the way everything had been explained to her. And that's after she'd been sentenced. Like, you can understand someone who didn't understand a charge, and then when they're sentenced, go, hang on a minute, I didn't think I was admitting to that. What's going on? You would say that, right? Hang on a minute, I didn't realise I was admitting to that. I thought it was something else. You could claim that, but she didn't. She said she was perfectly happy with everything. And Tommy Robinson was trying to claim, I noticed, can't remember the exact words he used, but that she was like, they used scare tactics against her. No, they just told her that if you admit your guilt, you get a lighter sentence. That's just standard. So you avoid wasting court time if you're as guilty as sin, right? But if you're innocent, you defend yourself. You claim not guilty. So they're complaining about the former Labour councillor, who, by the way, that was hate speech, you know, and so that was hate speech. The difference, I suppose, with him, I'm not trying to back him up, by the way. I'd have been more than happy if he was convicted with what he said. But the difference, you could argue, was twofold. First of all, he didn't admit his guilt and a jury acquitted him. Well, if Lucy Connolly thought she was innocent, why didn't she let a jury acquit her then? She had that option. She had the option. She just knew she was guilty and she didn't fancy a longer sentence, that's all. But the other thing with the former Labour councillor is, although what he said in isolation is inciting violence, and as I say, I'd have had no issue at all if a jury had convicted him, you would argue that there was no... He wasn't calling for a specific group of people to kill a specific group of people. She was. You know, there were people with literally pitchforks and fire outside a hotel. They didn't actually have pitchforks, right? But they had sticks. Outside a hotel. And the belief was that they might torch the place. You know, there was talk of that. So she was actually egging on people. And some of them did actually try to set fire to a bin outside it. But fortunately, they were a bit thick, so they couldn't actually set fire to the hotel. Although in one of the hotels, I mean, I'm mostly thinking of the one near me in South Yorkshire. But in one of the hotels elsewhere, they did actually cause a lot of damage. They got inside and caused a lot of damage. What are the immediate steps for the government to handle the situation with this narrative? It is difficult because the media are driving it. And it's, you know, what I would say as the government is don't feed it. Don't feed the fire. Don't feed the fire. I mean, there are some people saying that where the government are going wrong is in terms of sort of going along with the narrative. But that's not the extent of it. That's not the extent of it. They're just making it worse by, you know, at the end of the day, the government are not making any attempt to counter the narrative. Now, given that, or they're making very little attempt to, given that they're making very little attempt to counter the narrative, stop talking about it at all and talk about something else. It's like I keep saying, it all comes down to this idea of communications. Give the media something else to talk about. Like, the government have the power to force the media to talk about whatever the government want them to talk about. Stop doing big press conferences. Stop doing big speeches on asylum. And I'll tell you why. It's not because if they ignore it, it'll go away. It won't. The media are going to keep pushing it and public opinion will still be as it is. But if the government aren't going to act to push against it, just don't pull it. Don't pull the bloody thing. But like I referred to some polling that More in Common did a month or two ago. It might have been start of summer maybe, and it was focus group based. I would prefer it if they did focus groups and then formed hypotheses and then did more detailed surveying. But, you know, focus group, it still was interesting. So what they did is they showed, and I have done a video on this before when it happened, when they did it. They showed this focus group of people a series of like news clips and government ads and stuff like that, basically giving them information about various things the government were doing. And some of the stuff, like on the NHS, the people in the focus group approved of it, and it made them think better of the government, indicating that if the government talks more about this stuff, people would think better towards them. But where it was interesting was on asylum, right? Particularly the small boats, right? Particularly the small boats. So they showed them this news clip about what the government were doing. Now, here's where it got interesting. The focus group approved of what the government were doing, right? So they approved of the government's plans and what they were doing. So then you might think, they approve of it, therefore that made them think better towards the government, made them think worse towards the government. So actually learning about what the government were doing about asylum, even though they approved of it, actually meant that they felt less confident about the government. Now, why is that? Unfortunately, they didn't explore it. I might hypothesize because it's not enough, and it will never be enough. And I discussed this on Graham's show yesterday. The problem that Labour have is it's like they can easily beat the Tories on asylum issues, easily. But they can't beat Reform UK. And they're in competition on asylum issues. Like Robert Jenrick's just trying to hold on to Nigel Farage's coattails, right? It's not going to work. It's not going to work for the Tories. It's not going to work for Robert Jenrick. He was literally the immigration minister who put them all in the hotels in the first place. It's an absolute mad strategy. But Labour up against Reform UK, they don't even have policies. Like Nigel Farage says, we'll just leave the ECHR and we'll leave the UN and stuff like that. Well, he says we're going to pull out a certain UN treaty. It's like, so we're going to pull out the UN, are we? Okay. And that's his answer to everything. Just pull out. Just build a big wall around the country. Okay. All right then. He's not going to do any of this, by the way. I mean, he will try and leave the ECHR. He'll find it's as difficult as Brexit, more difficult than Brexit, actually. He'll try. He won't try the other stuff because he won't know how to. It says, can they push against it? It's too ingrained now. But is it too ingrained? That's my thing with the protest. That's my argument with the protest. Is it too ingrained? It's widespread, but isn't it quite shallow? Again, these protests are organised. There's lots of money behind the organisers. They've got money. They've got mainstream media promotion. They've got social media promotion, right? Local Facebook groups, Twitter, the full works, right? There's organisation behind these protests. Why are they so small? I think the feeling is more widespread, and it's getting increasingly more widespread. I think it's probably quite shallow, which means that you can pull again. If it was deep, if these protests were massive, if you were getting in cities, say, if you were getting thousands of people turning out, then I would say, yeah, that's deep. It's not. It's few. The biggest one was like 400, as far as I can tell. From what I can tell, it's about 400. You know, MZ, they say our neighbours are leaning more and more Farage's way on the asylum seeker issue. Yes, that's one. But how strong do they feel it? Are they prepared to go out and vote for it? And this is key. This is absolutely crucial. At the next election, because here's the really crucial question. At the next election, right, let's imagine Labour have built these Best Start centres in some of the poorest areas. So that's in your local community. You can now get access to healthcare services that previously you'd have to go into town to get, as well as other, important community services, particularly for parents of young children. So you've got that in there. You've got easier access to the NHS. Your GP's appointments are easier to get now. Let's say they've even made some significant progress on dentists. That's a massive issue, though. But let's say they've made some progress on dentists. Let's say the cost of living's eased, inflation's back under control, but also people are getting more money. Let's say that's getting better. Let's say they've even managed to reduce people's energy bills, at least in key parts of the country. Let us imagine Labour have done all that. Do they feel strongly enough about the asylum issue to risk all that? Because remember, a lot of people, even those who say they vote Reform UK, don't necessarily trust Nigel Farage to deliver on a lot of those things, right? They just don't think Labour are delivering on them. So it's like, well, might as well give the unknown a go. But let's say Labour show that they are delivering on at least some of those key issues. Hopefully several of them, but at least some. It's in a noticeable way. do people feel strongly enough about it that they will risk the mystery box over asylum, even though that might risk all the public service improvements and standard of living improvements? That's my question. I don't have an answer. But that, given the shallowness of support in these protests, that is a genuine question. Because these protests, name me a protest that has had as much media support as these anti-asylum protests in the last 10 years. Well, in the last 10 years, it would actually be anti-Brexit, pro-Brexit ones. But you know, honestly, give me a name of a campaign in the last 10 years that has had as much media promotion as anti-asylum, anti-immigration, Brexit. So why can't they get loads of people to turn out then? Why are the numbers so small? I've been here before. People went out in support of Enoch Powell, made no difference. I think this is more serious. But yes, you are right. Enoch Powell ended up getting nowhere. He had a lot of promotion in the media. Ultimately, that was easily battered away. It's not as easily battered away now, and I'll give you two main reasons why. First of all, I mean, I wasn't around back then. I didn't exist. But by and large, Enoch Powell was trying to push his stuff while standards of living were improving. Okay, so standards of living were getting better, whereas now, I mean, that's what I'm hoping will happen by the next election. Hopefully they'll be getting better again. But in the here and now, people don't think they are. The second issue, though, is things were less fragmented then. Everyone basically either voted Conservative or Labour, almost. Literally like 90% of people. And whereas now the vote is fragmented all over the place. You know, no party is going to get much more than 30% of the vote next time at the next election, if that. We might actually have an election, and that'll just show how broken it is. It is entirely feasible that no party gets even 30% of the vote next time at the next election. At which point, like, you know, Professor Rob Ford says, the election is basically gambling. It's a toss-up, crapshoot. You know, you can't predict it. Polling may actually, even MRP polling may genuinely struggle to predict it if the vote is going to be split this many ways in a first-past-the-post system. My worry is that however small these far-right protests are, there are probably more who can't be asked to march but share similar feelings. They're quite racist. Oh, no, yeah, that's true. You will always get a load of people who agree with them but can't be asked to go out. But my point is, this is one issue. This is one issue. In a general election, you have lots of issues. So what I am asking is, if at the next election, people feel that, when I say the economy is doing better, I mean people feel their own personal financial situation's better. So they feel better off. They can see the improvement in public services locally, whether it be transport, NHS, other things, right? Do they still prioritise this anti-asylum stuff? That's my question. They can believe it. Like, whenever you vote in a general election, you're not in agreement with all that party's policies. I wasn't in agreement. I mean, I consistently vote Labour. I haven't seen the next Labour manifesto, but just with what I know about the different parties, I am confident that Labour will be the party I still back next time. But I won't agree with all their policies. I didn't agree with all their policies. There's never been an election where I've agreed with all their policies. It doesn't happen, right? So you have to prioritise. You prioritise policies, don't you? You know, I mean, I support Labour because I prioritise workers' rights. That's you know, workers' rights are the ones I prioritise. There are other important ones, very important ones, but that's the one above all others, because I think if you prioritise workers' rights, the knock-on effect is it improves more people's lives than if you prioritise any other individual thing. That's my belief. So what are people going to prioritise? You might well have let's say 60%, 70%, 80% of the population who think that Nigel Farage is right about asylum, does that mean they'll vote for him? Or do they think, but what's more important to me is the fact that Labour have actually made things better and I don't want to risk that? Because we generally find the population tends to be risk averse, and voters tend not to vote away a government if they think things are getting better. They don't even have to be getting loads better, they just have to believe things are getting a bit better, and they tend not to trust the mystery box. Do I think this will give Farage an edge with regard to him becoming Prime Minister? Again, that's the question. It's like, this is what I'm trying to ask in the street, and we're not going to get an answer to it, so I'm asking a question we can't possibly get the answer to. Is it or is it not? It might not, because there's other polling as well that I've referred to in the past. For example, we know from polling that there's a lot of people who say they would vote Reform UK if there was an election tomorrow, but there isn't an election tomorrow. But there was some polling this summer, quite recent, that said there was a large number of those, and I mean a large percentage of those Reform UK voters said they would vote Labour if they improved if they dealt with the cost of living crisis and the NHS. So what that poll suggests, and obviously people will come up with, we don't know exactly how they're going to vote until the election is actually upon us, but that is a load of voters, a load of Reform UK voters saying that if they think the cost of living crisis and the NHS is in a better place at the next election, they'll vote Labour. So there was another chunk who said they would vote Labour if Labour stopped the boats. Now, we know Labour are not going to stop the boats. They have no plans to stop the boats. They've even admitted they won't have stopped the boats. This nonsense about deterrence, you don't deter genuine asylum seekers, right? It's not happening. It's not just that the deterrents are weak, the deterrents are weak. It's because what's the deterrent? What's the deterrent? Even the Rwanda plan wasn't a deterrent. What was that deterrent? We can send up to 200 of you to Rwanda. Well, there's like tens of thousands of us, mate. That's like pretty good odds for not getting sent to Rwanda, right? So there is no deterrent. Even if Farage could actually deport literally every single person coming across in a boat, even that's not a deterrent. Because where does he send them? I mean, he can't. We know he can't, and we know he won't. But where does he send them? Back where they came from? Well, they've just come from there. That's not a deterrent, right? They'll, even if it's like a 1% chance of getting away from their hellhole, that's what they'll do, because the odds for that are that steep. So there is no deterrent. The only way you stop the boats is by giving them an alternative way to claim asylum. Really that simple. So they aren't going to stop the boats. So the chunk of them who said they'll vote Labour if they stop the boats, they're not going to vote Labour. And that's another reason why Labour are mad to keep feeding the anti-immigration news cycle. Stop feeding it. It's like, it's not good for Labour. It's like tightening up. It's a bit like someone on a medieval torture rack, but a modern one where it's remote controlled, and you give the person on the rack the remote control and they keep turning it up. What's wrong with that? Are they masochists? Cost of living is a priority. Housing, access to health and obtaining employment, all that matters. Yes, all of that matters. And what I am saying is, if Labour can improve all of those things, I don't think Nigel Farage is in a great position to become Prime Minister at all. Because Nigel Farage pretty much has to win a majority. He will not get support from other parties. Even the Conservative Party, I mean, you never know. I suppose it depends who their leader is, but they will struggle because the Conservatives are very unlikely to join them in coalition. They might support his government in a supply and confidence vote, but they're very unlikely to join him in coalition. The reason is they know what happened to the Lib Dems when they joined in coalition. If they go along with stuff that's wildly unpopular to their core support, the Lib Dems went from like dozens of MPs to less single figures overnight, 2015. And for what? It wasn't because they were in coalition with the Conservatives. It's because of one policy, austerity. It just takes one policy that is dead against your base, and the Tories would lose scores of MPs at the following election. So, and the other thing is, like, what would the Tories get out of the coalition? Because you can think to yourself, oh, but they can, but they'd be in power, they'd back in government. No, they wouldn't. The Lib Dems weren't really in government, were they? What did the Lib Dems get to do in government? They say they took the edge off some Tory policies. Now, I actually say they have a reasonable claim to be able to say that, but that's not how people saw it. That's not how people saw it. So what did the Lib Dems actually get? Gay marriage. They got that. Well done. Good. That was good. That was it. And they got an absolute drubbing at the next election. I don't think the Tories want to work in coalition with Reform UK. No one else will. So I think Farage has to win a majority. And the thing is, if he wins a majority at the next election, think about what this means. They've got, I have to keep remembering, it's 5 MPs, right? They've got 5 MPs. If they were on for a majority at the next election, they'd probably win some more by-elections, right? So they'd have a few more. Let's say they've got about 10 MPs at the next election. So then they're going to overnight get about 340, 350 MPs. Is that what we're saying? They're going to have over 300 brand new MPs who've got zero parliamentary experience. Is that what we're saying? They might have a few former Tories, right? A few former Tories maybe. But beyond that, that's what we're saying. They can't even put a government together with that. That means literally almost every minister will have no parliamentary experience. And none of them will have any ministerial experience. Because Reform UK are not the official opposition now, they don't even get to shadow ministers. So they will have no idea how to run a ministry. None at all. They'll have no idea. Obviously, they'll be able to blame the civil service, but they won't get it done. They won't get anything done. I mean, they'll still cause a load of damage. Don't get this. Don't sort of misunderstand me. I'm not trying to say, don't worry, if Reform come into government, they won't be able to do anything. They'll be straight out a few years later. No, they'll do an immense amount of damage because, in actual fact, they will be able to pass some. They'll eventually pass some legislation that does terrible things. They will be able to, take a sledgehammer to a lot of our treaties, international treaties, and so on. They will have executive power that they can use. But they will not be able to do half the stuff they want to do because they won't know how to do it. And we can see how they'll behave in local government. They'll a load of infighting because they won't be able to do what they think they can do. Nigel Farage will have to start watering things down. That'll trigger a load of infighting. It'll be chaos. Like in America, and people need to appreciate this more, the big difference between Reform UK in government and Trump in government. Trump in government, right? We know that his secretaries of state are not all, but mostly they're incompetent. They ain't got a clue what they're doing. But the United States is more than just the government. You've got Congress and you've got state legislatures, right? And all of those were experienced. So the Republicans in Congress, they're all experienced. So most of the sort of governance of America is experienced. It's been led by someone who's not... I mean, Trump has served one term as president. Served, I use that in a charitable sense. But it doesn't matter that he and, his immediate team are not that experienced because the rest of the legislators are. Whereas here what would happen is Reform UK, the entire legislature would be very inexperienced. They wouldn't have that inbuilt expertise and experience anywhere. It wouldn't exist. Anyway, we'll go through some more questions here. Why are the Lib Dems so quiet? Because they're as bad at communication as anyone else. The Lib Dems are working quite well locally, so they're quite active on the doorstep, which is their strategy. At the same time, why are they so quiet? Because they don't get free publicity in the mainstream media and they put no effort. I mean, again, it's a real bugbear of mine, zero effort into getting through on social media, where there's an ever increasing proportion of people getting their news from. Utterly ridiculous. It's any political party that does not have a robust social media strategy is, I'm sorry, not even trying to engage with the public. Not even trying. One pagan there saying, Rachel Reeves set to scrap European environmental rules to boost building projects. Is this worth the environmental cost, Phil? It's difficult to say. Probably not. In terms of some of the so where there's been deregulation from Labour, it's in planning reforms and the financial markets. Will it come back to bite us on the arse? Yes and maybe. The yes is because when you deregulate for the purposes of boosting economic growth, that means you're deliberately lowering standards. That's exactly what you're doing. If you're deregulating because a certain thing, a regulation isn't really promoting standards, that's different. Like one of the planning reforms that I was totally on board with was that local authorities could block planning projects, building projects, because it wasn't deemed beautiful. Literally, you could say, I don't think that's beautiful, so I can block it. That's ridiculous. That's got nothing to do with standards, right? Beauty is like in the eye of the beholder, so to speak. Yeah. But by and large, a lot of the deregulation that's coming out is with the expressed purposes of boosting economic growth, which by definition means sacrificing standards. So there's a sense in which, yes, in 10 years' time, 15 years' time, we're going to look back at it and go, right, that was because we deregulated, we shouldn't have done. But the maybe is because Labour do need to grow the economy very quickly. They haven't got 10 or 15 years. They've got like 3. They've got 3. There's 4 years before they have to have an election. But you really want to be in good shape in year 4 to have an election then if you look like you're going to get a good result, right? So they've got 3 years. So there's a sense in which if it works, even if there's a long-term cost to it, right? If there's a cost later, because the threat to us is a Reform UK government, if it works, I mean, first of all, if it does work, you could argue they could always tighten the regulations up once they've got things going in the right direction, like slowly pull back. Whether they will is another matter. They may not. But if it works, that's the maybe. So if it actually works, even if it's short-term gain for long-term pain, let's say, if it keeps Nigel Farage out, then it may be worth it. That's what my answer to that would be. David, they say I get a Lib Dem leaflet once a month, so I assume you're in a Lib Dem target area. Yeah, they are. I know that in terms of the seats they target, they are active, at least locally, pushing local issues. They're not good nationally. I think they I think they should be. I think they should put more effort in. I'm sorry, anyone who does not put effort into building up an audience on social media, and even the Lib Dems, who don't get anywhere near as much as Labour to spend on their comms, they have more than enough for a social media team, and they should use them. Why don't I use super chats? Should make more money for a channel because. This is members only. So in terms of my live stream stuff, as I went into free-for-all Q&A territory, so I try to avoid, so political channels, it may be easy to get trolls on. Now, to be fair, there are more tools now. So I'm remembering back in the days when I used to live stream on my gaming channel, where you didn't actually have a lot of moderation tools. What you needed was someone to be looking at the chat and banning people when they were trolling or something or being abusive. Whereas I don't work with people. I'm a bit of a loner, a bit of a hermit, you may have noticed. So I've even got the monk thing going on. Look, I'm becoming a monk. So yes, I'm a bit of a loner. So I don't do that. So I manage everything. I'm a bit of a, like, come up with my own solutions type of thing. I'm the sort of person, when I was single, if I had something that needed 3 people to assemble it, I wouldn't go next door and ask for the neighbour's help, who would have given it. I would just go, right, I'm going to use my engineering know-how to do it myself, which I did. So my way of moderating was to go, right, what we'll do is I'll just have member-only chats. So people are paying for that. And then if you're going to have member-only chats, you don't want members who are already paying to be paying more. That's just grasping. So I don't do that. Now, I have done the odd stream where it's been a special stream and I've opened it up to subscribers, and then I don't mind having super chats in. Now, I did do a stream where subscribers could chat on Thursday, an impromptu stream. I didn't put super chats on that because that was just an experiment anyway. But in theory, if I started to do more out of schedule streams, and put it on for subscribers, then I would put super chats on there. But I'm not having 2 paywalls. That is just greedy. So that's the answer to that one. I mean, in terms of money, even though I know I keep going on about the fact that, views have shrunk, and this week, do you know what? I'm hoping people are on holiday, because the views this week, the last few days, have been awful. I'm just hoping people are on holiday. But I'm still more than fine, right? In terms of money, I ain't got a problem, right? Unlike some people, and I would have, if there were some people who last year went full-time in terms of the old political commentary on YouTube. Some of them, if they'd have asked me for my advice, I would have said, don't do it, because I could have told them that after the general election, you'll struggle for views. Unless you're like a really very, very tribal populist type channel, because they can still bring them in. If you're a more moderate channel, you're going to lose views. I knew it was coming. But, I would have to have a catastrophic loss of views before I was in financial trouble. So I don't need to make more money. I want more views for the sake of more views. So I don't need to make more money. But there we go. UK plan has always been the answer's no. Now, what's the question? Still hasn't stopped every UK high street looking identical. Well, I mean, in terms of the yes, that is true. That is true. There is a built-in resistance a lot of the time to planning projects, unless a local councillor happens to own a construction company. Then sometimes it's yes. Without still knowing the question. Like Scunthorpe near me, it's outside Scunthorpe, right? Years ago, they built a roundabout in the middle of a bloody dual carriageway, right? Nothing's coming off it. I assumed, oh, well, they'll be building new things, right? There'll be like a new retail park or houses or something. That's why they're doing it, right? Nothing. Do you know what they've done since? They built another roundabout further up the dual carriageway. There's still nothing being built there. Maybe there will be at some point. I mean, maybe with Labour's push, maybe something will finally be built. But for 5 years now, they built that roundabout. If I looked into it, I can't be asked, but if I looked into it, I would bet you anything. Not anything, but I'll bet you £1 that that construction company had links to a Tory councillor, because they built this roundabout, they slowed it down, they went from 70 miles an hour to 50 miles an hour, put this bloody roundabout in the middle of the dual carriageway, built nothing. My stepdaughter and I reckon that if it wasn't done because a Tory councillor had a construction company or a friend who did, right, then the only other explanation we can come up with is maybe they're into dogging, because what they actually created was an ideal dogging site. That's all it is. They spent taxpayer money on a pretty good dogging site. Anyway, BlackRock are funding 3/4 of our new green energy infrastructure. Profits will go to shareholders. Our bills won't be cheap as the investors are only interested in maximum profits. Well, no, that's not actually true, because we are actually building some ourselves. BlackRock are funding a lot of it because BlackRock own everything. So that's no. You might as well just say the private sector's funding 3/4 of it, because BlackRock is the private sector these days. But no, the taxpayer is actually funding energy projects directly, which we will own or have a share in. So that's not actually quite true. Interestingly, I might do a video on this tomorrow, on the issue of state stakes in private enterprise. Do you know what Trump's doing? He's been a right little Marxist, is Trump. He wants the US state, the government, the taxpayer, to have a stake in any massive... He's trying to do it with Nvidia, for example, and a few others. So any large corporation that gets tax subsidies from the US government, he thinks the state should have shares in that company so that we can share in the profits as well. Isn't that remarkable? You know, you would think, you know, this idea that the state should have a stake, and we're talking about a big stake as well, not a majority stake, but a big, like 10% type of thing, 8, 9, 10%. That the state, the taxpayer, should have a stake in any big corporation that gets state subsidies. You would think an idea like that's come out of Spain or something, wouldn't it? Not the ultra-capitalist USA. But that is what we will have actually in energy. So we are actually, the taxpayer is putting money into some energy projects, and we are having a stake. And it's not like we're giving them the money and then, because that sometimes happens. I get that. That does sometimes happen where the state says, look, we'll put some money in if you build this factory here, but it's your factory. That's not what this is. That's not what GB Energy is. We actually have the stake. Jeffrey there saying, it took Newcastle Council about 4 years to redo South Gosworth roundabout. Hasn't made a ha'porth of difference. In fairness, Newcastle has been Labour council since about AD2. Well, long may it remain, because the alternative is Reform UK. Ain't going to be the Tories that take over Newcastle, is it? Where is this, Phil, so I can avoid it? It's between Scunthorpe, the big Tesco roundabout, and the M180. There's 2 roundabouts now. We're getting roundabout inflation. Still nothing big. I mean, again, with the second roundabout, maybe they are actually planning on building something this time. But they didn't last time, so I'm not holding my breath. Anyway, Trump is claiming the US owns stock in Intel. I suspect tax dollars are paying for his grift. But it is interesting, no, but he actually wants the states to have a stake in it. Again, I think this is his transactional nature, but what do the Republicans think about it? That's what I would like to know. What do they think about it? I think it's quite interesting. Workers on boards next. Yeah, wouldn't that be amazing if Trump said, do you know what we need? We should also have unions having a seat on the board. Or workers' groups in general, whatever. That'd set the cat amongst the pigeons amongst the Republicans, wouldn't it? If Trump's next big thing is, do you know what we need? We need more workers on executive boards, like in Germany. Anyway, where are we? Well, let's get back onto some things. My local Labour Party are not understanding about the need for accessible campaigning for us members who can't go out on the doorstep and deliver leaflets, don't get the need for social media. Well, I mean, to be fair to them, Ivan, if at the top end, if the leadership doesn't get it. I had an email. Oh, let me see if I can find it. Oh, do you know what? I won't be able to find it. But I had an email from someone, a viewer, right? And they said that their local MP, I'm not going to name, I can't even remember who it is, by the way, but I wouldn't name them anyway. But their local MP had been told by the leadership, you need to do more on social media. So apparently, right, the Labour leadership, which is shit at social media, has told their MPs to start doing more stuff on social media. I mean, that is the blind leading the blind. The Labour leadership don't know how to do social media. I did actually reply back to them and said, look, if they do want my help, feel free to contact me. I will absolutely help any progressive MP. I don't care what party even. Any progressive MP that wants to improve their stuff on social media, if I think they're progressive, not someone who just thinks they're progressive. If I think they're progressive, I will help them for free, time allowing. If I had 100 suddenly ask for help, okay, I can't do that. But given that I have 0 people asking for help, I can absolutely spare the time. So I didn't really ask details, but I'm thinking to myself, did they actually give any advice on this? Did they actually give them any advice on how to engage on social media? Or did they just want them to do what Liam Byrne is doing and just put up a few videos on YouTube or something? You know, because he's the one who's putting in the most effort. He's not really getting great rewards for it because, you know, it's quite clear he doesn't really get it either. You know, there is, you know, YouTube is not just sticking videos up. but he's putting the effort in, and some of his videos do all right. You know, he's had a few decent ones. I can look here. You know, there's this one, 20,000 views asking Keir Starmer a question. The liaison committee, 18,000 views on water bills. 60,000 is supermarkets one. I even did a video based on that one. 60,000 views he got. That's decent. But then, you know, a lot of them are just like a few hundred views. But, you know, he's probably doing as good a job as anyone, as any MP. I've not looked at every MP, but he does, you know, he's doing better than most, possibly better than everyone else I don't know that there's any other Labour MPs doing as well. And yet even he could do much better. And I don't mean by spending loads of time on it. He hasn't got loads of time. But just by, you know, doing it a bit different. But anyway. Did I see the war games in Finland? French Rafale won in simulated dogfight with an F-35. Did it? No, I didn't. No. Daniel's saying PFIs, that's what we're getting with BlackRock. It's not. The public will be paying BlackRock for decades. But that's not what we're getting with the energy thing. What I'm saying is GB Energy are investing taxpayer money themselves, and we get a stake in that, proportionate to that investment. That's in the legislation. You can look up the legislation yourself. Tim, they're saying, Phil, our Labour MP isn't on Blue Sky, etc., just Facebook and Twitter. I think that is supposed to be. Yeah, I mean, the thing with Blue Sky, see, I'm not getting on with Blue Sky at all. It's like, but then my use for Blue Sky is very different. I don't use, or for Twitter, I should say, I don't use Twitter to get a message. I do post things on Twitter, but I don't use Twitter particularly to get a message out. I use Twitter to listen. So I follow people on Twitter. So I'm not finding Blue Sky useful at all. But if I were an MP, what I would say is, if you're going to use Twitter, if you're going to post something on Twitter, it's really easy to post exactly the same thing on Blue Sky. Yeah, it is. You can actually treat those platforms reasonably similarly. So, like, I wouldn't advise, like, one of the reasons, like, so when I first started doing the channel, I did plan to have a multi-platform strategy. So I planned to do stuff on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and I didn't do any of them. Didn't do it. I just focused on YouTube in the end. Now that was a mistake, but the reason I didn't, like, because you could think to yourself, look, Phil, you could at the very least post, you know, clip some videos and do short type videos. You're doing shorts anyway. Why don't you just put your shorts on Twitter and Blue Sky and Instagram and TikTok, right? Why not do that? Well, I could do that. But I also think the type of content you want for the different platforms is different. So I would be thinking, if I was going to do stuff for TikTok, it wouldn't be the same stuff I do for YouTube, or not in the same style. And if I do stuff for Instagram, not the same style as I do for that. So the reason why I didn't just post stuff on there is because I didn't see the point, even though arguably it would be better than nothing, but I didn't see the point in just cannibalizing my YouTube stuff and putting it on the other platforms. I should do bespoke content for those platforms, but that's extra time, which I at the moment don't have. At some point it may settle down again. At some point, because one of the problems I have at the moment is not just that the audience is now smaller, the source material, I keep saying I hope that it's just people on holiday this week, but it could be that the views this week have been bad just because the source material is bad. It may not be that the audience has gone down at all. It may just be the topics I'm doing are not as engaging to people because there's really not a lot of news going on. In terms of the sort of news that is appealing to my audience, shall I say. There's always news going on, of course. But, you know, in terms of the big stuff that is appealing to my audience, there's just a lack of source material. And it may be that Parliament comes back next month and then, you know, it gets better again. I don't know. But, you know, so maybe there's... because ironically, I say ironic, it's not ironic at all. When you don't have as much source material, you have to work harder to really try and get the most out of what there is. So that's me taking longer to do stuff. I'm taking longer to do my videos at the moment. Whereas if there was suddenly more source material in the next year or two, good and bad news, preferably more good news, then that can be, that might ease my time. And then maybe I get more time to do stuff on other platforms. I don't know. MZ, they're saying, strangely got my account suspended on Twitter show X. Haven't bothered going back for half a year. Did you say something mean about space, Karen? Because I have not been banned on Twitter. So I don't know. I don't know how you get banned, really. Labour need to engage in positive hyperbole. They do. They need to, I keep saying it, they need to take out a leaf out of, you know, what the US and Mexicans do. Do a press conference every day. Not a traditional one. Get them round, get them comfy, just have a chat with them. And then you decide the topic. They will report on that topic. I keep saying, you cannot control how they report it. They will put their own spin on it. But you mention the topic. Because I'll tell you something. Here's it. I'll leave this as my last point because we're running out of time. Going back to the original topic. Labour talk about immigration or asylum, anything to do with immigration. Anything at all to do with immigration, asylum or whatever, right? The press then straight away go to Nigel Farage to get his thoughts on it. Of course they do, because he's Mr. Immigration, right? Or Mr. Anti-Immigration, right? Labour talk about employment rights. Do the media go to Nigel Farage to ask what he's got to say? I'd like it if they did, but he's probably not the person you go to ask about it. Labour talk about net zero or green energy or secure energy, anything to do with energy. Is Nigel Farage a natural person to go and ask for his thoughts? Not really. And if he was, again, it's his weak spot. Like, Nigel Farage, what Labour need to do is, we want to talk about stuff that Nigel Farage doesn't want to talk about. Nigel Farage is not just out of kilter with the public, he's out of kilter with most of his own voters on employment rights, green energy, housing, right? Particularly renters' rights, yeah? But also planning, building, actual affordable and social housing. Also support for Ukraine, but that's not a big vote with foreign affairs, even though the public are very much on Ukraine's side. And it is something where Farage is out of kilter. Nonetheless, foreign affairs, even at a time of war, is not a vote winner, right? As Winston Churchill discovered in 1945. It's not a vote winner. So, but the issues that Labour are strong on, NHS, not privatised. Farage wants to privatise it, right? The energy sector, green energy, secure energy, solar, wind, popular, right? Even with Reform voters. Admittedly, there's a larger percentage of Reform voters against them, but most Reform voters are still, or as they are polling at the moment, are still in favour. And employment rights. That's what I would do. And Labour should be hammering those 3 points. Employment rights, green energy, and what's the other one I said? NHS. NHS funding specifically. Talk about those all the time. And then the media have got a choice, right? They can either go and ask Farage what he thinks. He doesn't want to say. He doesn't really want to say. Or they can just not bother asking him at all. Either way, job done. But I'll leave it with that one. Thanks for coming on, everyone. Have a great rest of evening. And until next time, I'll see you later.